Welcome back. My name is Darren Thomas, and I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. In this video, we're going to look at some simple action features that you can use in Shiny, of course, which is associated with R. So let's go ahead and see what we can learn. Okay, so you can see that I'm inside RStudio, obviously. And we're going to start by looking at action buttons. And so action buttons, when you click on them, something is supposed to happen. Now, we're not going to get into the details of actually putting actions behind our action buttons. We're just going to look at how you can make them. So let's just start with that first. So here's our code. You can clearly see it right here. I have to load my library Shiny. That's where all of my, functions come from. And then in this line of code right here, lines 3 to 6, if you can see the numbers, I'm setting up my fluid page. The fluid page is kind of like the skeleton where all of the different things are kind of put. That's kind of the simplest way to say it. And inside that fluid page, I have two action buttons. The first one here is going to be called rent, and it has a text on it that's going to say rent as well. And it's going to show a picture of an icon, which is a building. And then the second one is going to be, buy, and it's going to show a picture of a house, basically. This will make more sense in a second. And of course, once you set up your fluid page, you have to create a function. We normally call it server. And it has 3 arguments: input, output, and session. And so then we run our actual function here called Shiny App, which takes our input of a user interface and output of a server. And so normally a lot of times inside this server function that we're making right here in line 7 and 8, you could put all kind of complex things. Normally focus on the output because that's what the server is for. It's for the output. But we're not doing too much of that in this video. So what we're going to do now is run this and display it. And so let me go ahead and show this to you. And so you can see the output right there. And so you can see, you have to your left the rent and you have to your right the buy. And so if you were to click on those, it should do something, but it won't in this particular video. And of course, the picture of the building comes from when we use the icon argument and we set it to building. You can change the picture to a cat, dog, tree, bush, whatever. It's up to you. I'm sure there's a list somewhere that you can find of the different pictures you can put in the icon argument. But that is essentially how you complete that first little line of code that we set up. So let's go back to RStudio and move to our next little option here. So for our next trick, let's see here. Go ahead and stop the server real quick. There we go. Ended that. For our next trick, we're going to focus on just outputs. Now, this is a little bit more complicated, so I got to kind of walk you through it. So here we go. So you can see this is a lot longer, a lot more information. Okay, so here's what we're doing. In our user interface, that's kind of what UI stands for. We have our fluid page again. That's kind of our bare bones skeleton. And we have 2 functions that we're using here. One is called text output, which is going to match whatever we put in the render text. More on that in a second. And the other is going to be verbatim text output, which is going to take our data from our iris underscore sepal underscore length. There is a data set called iris that comes default with R, where this data is kind of coming from. So that's what we're doing. We're taking this text output and we're taking this verbatim text right here. Now, moving down here, and when we say text, we're going to be taking that right there probably. Now, here we go. When we're looking at the server, you can see we have some code inside this time. So output text, all right, this is going to be lining up with what we put right here. That's what it's doing. So it's kind of like you do things backwards in Shiny. The output is put first and then you put the input in the output section. I mean, if you can kind of follow my train of thought there. So output $text, we're creating this right here and it's going to render text. This is what it's going to render. And where is this going to go? Inside the actual app that we're making, this information will be right at the top. You'll see it in a second. And then for our second one, output, what we're doing is this. We're going to render print, and we're going to take the summary of the data for iris_sepal.length. So that is for this right here. So what you're going to see is, you're going to see this at the top, the text output. Then you're going to see this underneath it, a table. And why is it a table? Because it's going to be the summary right here. So the logic is kind of going back and forth. I mean, for coders and programmers, this makes complete sense. But for us mere mortals, it seems almost backwards. All right. Now, to make this stuff work, we're going to use the function called render text for our first guy right here. For the text one, for just the text of summary of iris sepal length right here, we got to use this function. Now, to render our summary information, we got to use the render print function. That's what it is. And so I know this is kind of weird and abstract. It'll make more sense when you see it. So let's run it. And we're going to take a look at this. Let me show it to you now. All right, so you can clearly see what's going on. I have summary of iris sepal length right at the top. This is taken directly from our information. I'll show you real quick. Right here in line number 20, that information right there, and that's for the server part. And then for our actual input is going to be line 16. So line 16 and line 20 are working together to produce this summary of iris sepal length. Now, for the actual summary data, what we have there, this is, if you're familiar with R, the summary function shares this information. And so what's working together there is line 17 and line 21 are working together to produce what you see right here in this simple little table. And so that's kind of how it works in terms of how the inputs and the outputs work together. So to go back, what's happening is this. In line 16, we're creating an input. This is information that's going to come into our system, and it's going to be text. But we don't know what that text is yet. We have to tell it what the text is going to be in line 20 inside the server function, if you will. And so we tell it what it's going to be right there in line 20, okay? Now, line 17, we are going to output something verbatim. It's going to be a text output. We don't know exactly what it is. We're calling it iris_sepal_length. And then in line 21, we define what is actually going to come out. So that is going to be found using the summary here. And then we have to render print. Render print and render text are functions within Shiny that allow us to do these things. And then of course in line 23, that's the standard, normally the last line of code most of the time, where you have the UI and the server. We're taking that information, we're making them work together in line 23. So you can see that's really kind of cool what you can do right there. Let's move to our next example. All right, let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and close the server down and start with a new one. All right. So let's see what we have left. Okay, input and output working together this time. I think we kind of talked about this already, but this is a slightly different way to approach this. All right, so here is our code. Let me just make sure we can get it all in. Yeah. Okay, so what we have here is going on in lines 28 to 40 now. And so we're going to have our text input. We're going to call this name. That's going to be the name of the object, if you will. And it's going to share this question right here. What is your name? And then the text output is going to be greeting. So this is kind of weird, but it'll make sense in a second. Now we have our function this time, input output, and we're going to output greeting. So we're going to output whatever is here, and we're going to render the text. Paste, hello, input name. So whatever they put as their name, we're going to output hello and put their name after it. That's essentially what's going to happen here. So let's see if we can make this work. It's kind of hard to articulate until you actually do it. All right, so here we go. Now, notice something different this time. Notice how we have this box right here. That's for the text input. So you're going to input the text. It's asking you, what is your name? If you remember, that's exactly what we have here in line 29. What is your name? And whatever your name is going to be kind of stored under this object here, name. And then we have greeting. That's going to be the output from the server. So this input right here is what we're going to put into the server, and the output is what's going to come out of the server. And so in lines 34 and 35 here, you can see that the output is going to render a text. It's going to paste hello and input $name. So whatever you put in line 29 is going to come out in line 35. So let's run this. I just typed that my name is, what's the wrong language? Sorry about that. Here we go. So I put Darren, and you can clearly see as I type my name, it appears right here. Now there are ways to delay it, reaction text, reactive things, and things way more complicated than this. But for our purposes, you can see right here how you can just type your name and it'll appear right next to the hello. The input is right here, and then the output is right down here underneath it. That's how it works. Rather clever. And again, this is all basic Shiny. Some of the things I've seen are rather amazing in what these guys can do with it. Moving on, I think we're getting towards the end of our examples here. Let's go ahead and go back to RStudio. Okay, here we go. Jump back in here. All right, file upload. Not the most exciting line of code, but again, for some people this might be useful. So we're down here in lines 47 to 53. So we have fluid page again. We've talked about that multiple times. We got file input. We're going to call it upload, and there's nothing else to put. That's why we put null there. Nothing else to share. And so now we have to, of course, have our server. Even though it's empty, we have to still put it, and then we run this. So what the file input allows you is it allows you to upload files. So this is common on probably most websites. And so if you need people to provide you with information or data or files, whatever they might be, you could use this function or this setup here. So let's go ahead and run this, and we'll take a quick look at it, and we will be done for today. All right. So you can see right there, we've all seen this before at many different websites. You can clearly put information or files in here. If you click on the browse, it will work. I got to be honest with you. But again, if you really want to store things in a certain place, you have to set up things behind the scenes on the actual app to make that work. But again, this is just another tool that you can use for your own purposes. So now that we have these basic ideas, we're going to go back to RStudio and just summarize and conclude the video. So in this particular video, we looked at several interesting different tools and tricks that you can use in RStudio. We started by looking at action buttons. These are buttons you can create that people can click on to do whatever it is you have in mind. And so you can, of course, set a name for these. You can put text on the actual button. And if you desire, you can have an icon, a little picture to kind of help the user to understand the function behind that particular button. From there, we looked at outputs. So we looked at how to use text output, verbatim text output, and we looked at how the server and the user interface kind of work together. So generally, for every line in the user interface, there's going to be a corresponding line in the server. Not always. I'm sure there's many exceptions, but generally that's how it works. And so we had our text output here, and then we started with our output $text, and we use render text. We had a verbatim text output here, and then we had our render print right here. And so those two were working together to produce the actual table that we made with a title at the top. Our next example was, of course, how you can interact with the app. And so in this one, we had a simple text input. It made a box where we could type our name as an example. And then we followed up the name by saying hello to the person who typed their name. And all this, again, is working out down here. Now, in this example, we still have a line of code working for each one of these, but they're kind of working together, I have to be honest. And so for the name, it's clearly down here. But you can see, even though this function is inside or nested inside render text, it still has a function associated with it. So right here. And then for the outer function, we have the greeting, and that's all being rendered right here. And then our last example was just an example of how you can set up a way for people to upload files into an app that you might be making with Shiny. And so the code for that is down here below. So again, I want to thank you so much for listening and watching. My name is Darren Thomas. I am the Director of Educational Research Techniques. Thank you again for watching and listening, and you take care.